Lapis X Labyrinth is yet another little niche title from Nippon Ichi Software. There have been quite a few of them in recent times, but the struggle to keep playing that I experienced in both the Princess Guide and Penny Punching Princess did not manifest itself during my time with Lapis X Labyrinth, and for that reason, this is the best of the lot. I'm not going to lie to you, this game is best played in short bursts over a long period of time, a couple of hours in a single session at most. It does get repetitive if you're binging, but it was not nearly as bad as I expected. Lapis X Labyrinth is kind of a dungeon crawling platformer hack and slash RPG. You fight your way through dungeons, collecting loot and taking down the big bad boss. Dungeons themselves are somewhat like Metroid, with both horizontal movement and verticality, not to mention a lot of collectibles, teleporters and gates that need to be unlocked to reach the lower levels and complete the dungeon. There are 80 dungeons split into 10 chapters, each dungeon with 2 or more levels, and you will notice at some point that the layout of each level inside a dungeon isn't always entirely unique. You will run into similar layouts and notice patterns here and there, and this is where the feeling of repetitiveness mostly comes from. Well, that and the fact that the story barely exists and you are essentially just picking up the same mission over and over again to go into a dungeon. The good news is there is plenty in the game to mitigate these repetitive aspects. Combat, for example, has a tremendous amount of variety. After a short tutorial period, you'll be able to create and add 4 different characters to your party from 8 different classes. You can create a character from each class if you want and change your party between missions, but the maximum party size is 4. Your party of 4 doesn't operate on its own though, in fact you have complete control. Characters in Lapis X Labyrinth stack on top of each other like a totem pole. You can switch who the leader is at any point inside a dungeon. This is the character you control directly. The others can be thrown to perform an attack of their own, used as an extra jump, or used to perform a special team attack. The leader has a moveset made up of both basic attacks and directional specials, and each of the 8 classes does feel distinct. There are ranged base fighters, close quarters combateers, spell users, and even a pan-wielding waifu. And as you'll be switching your leader multiple times during a dungeon, the combat never ceases to remain interesting. The town quest hub is a very basic affair with very little to do until you complete the first chapter and vendors begin being added. From chapter 2 onward, you'll have access to the other big piece of variety the game has to offer: character building. You get a ton of loot from dungeons with a ton of different abilities. You will eventually be able to add abilities to gear, strengthen abilities, increase the level of gear you can use, and all the other things you expect from a standard RPG system. The first couple of hours will predominantly be spent inside dungeons because there simply isn't much else for you to do, but after that I found myself spending more and more time in the town messing around with my party and gear. As I mentioned earlier, the story is basically non-existent and the most straightforward there is. You come to a town, you want to explore dungeons. Exploring lots of dungeons gives your guild more prestige, which entices more services into the town. The story is just there as a bare minimum justification for the gameplay. Reaching the end will take you somewhere in the realm of 20 hours. And speaking of gameplay, there is one mechanic I haven't talked about yet. Fever time. This is when you'll see those big gem explosions and bright colours flood the screen. Killing enemies and collecting loot fills a fever meter which sets off and grants you bonuses to gold and loot while it's active. It backs up the game's biggest strength. Lapis X Labyrinth has style. The aesthetics are constantly gorgeous, from the adorable chibi characters stacking on top of each other to the beautiful environments to the explosions of delightful colour. It can make you completely forget that you are essentially just doing the same thing over and over. Performance is pretty top notch on the Switch too, given the sheer amount of stuff that happens on screen. Only the most intense of scenes during fever time cause slowdown, and even then it is never an issue in terms of responsiveness. To finish off here, I really want to be able to say, everyone go and buy this game now, but I simply can't do that. It is a niche game, and the audience it's looking for needs to understand that what it's offering isn't a strong story or a carefully crafted journey. It's a very well made, relatively simple but engaging way to pass time in short bursts. It oozes style and has a great combat system, but the repetitive nature of the game isn't completely mitigated by these positives. If you are looking for a way to pass the time, it's a hell of a lot more fun and engaging than a mobile game, and you could certainly find a lot worse in the dungeon crawler category than Lapis X Labyrinth. As long as you know what you're getting, I do recommend it.